Greetings and welcome back to The Princess and the Goblin. I am Camelmore Squire Boy Rolfe, and joining me today is the noble lord and leader, Lord Patty. Say hello, Lord Patty.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Hope you don't mind. I'm gonna let Rolfe read this next chapter.
I will be reading the next chapter because it's nice and short, and Lord Patty promised that he'd let me read the chapter.
Yes, I did promise that, Rolfe, but it is short, so go ahead. Go ahead and get your spiel out.
Okay. Chapter 12, titled A Short Chapter About Curdie. Curdie has spent many
Okay, I'm starting to have second thoughts about this. Rolfe, yes, stop, please.
You didn't like it?
Well, Rolfe, it's not that I didn't like it. In fact, I really liked it. I thought it was beautiful and great and wonderful and grand, and your voice has come so far. But I just...
Was it annoying?
Rolfe, no, it was not annoying. Well, it was just too beautiful. I think it would excite our peasants a little too much because it sounds so great, and we're not trying to excite them. We're trying to allow them to slowly drift into sleep.
Oh! Okay.
Thank you for understanding, Rolfe. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and start over, and it will be me reading, Lord Petty, your lord and leader. Here we go. Chapter 12. A short chapter about Curdie. Curdie spent many nights in the mine. His father and he had taken Mrs. Peterson into the secret, for they knew Mother could hold her tongue, which was more than could be said of all the miners' wives. But Curdie did not tell her that every night he spent in the mine, part of it went in earning a new red petticoat for her. Mrs. Peterson was such a nice, good mother. All mothers are, more or less, but Mrs. Peterson was nice and good, all more and no less. She made a little heaven in that poor cottage on the hillside for her husband and son to go home to out of the dreary earth in which they worked. I doubt if the princess was very much happier, even in the arms of her huge great-grandmother, than Peter and Curdie were in the arms of Mrs. Peterson. True, her hands were hard, and chapped, and large, but it was with work for them, and therefore, in the sight of the angels, her hands were so much the more beautiful. And if Curdie worked hard to get her a petticoat, she worked hard every day to get him comforts which he would have missed much more than she would a new petticoat, even in winter. Not that she and Curdie ever thought of how much they worked for each other. That would have spoiled everything. Take note, little boys and girls. Treat your mom right. When left alone in the mine, Curdie always worked on for an hour or two first, following the lode which, according to Glump, would lead at last into the deserted habitation. Remember, the lodes are the pathways that the miners build under the ground. After that, he would set out on a reconnoitering expedition. Now that's a strange set of words, but reconnoitering essentially means a military scout, meaning he's gonna go out and scout out the whereabouts, see what it looks like, to check things out. In order to manage this, or rather the return from it, better than the first time, he had bought a huge ball of fine string, having learned the trick from Hop-o'-my-Thumb, whose history his mother had often told him. Not that Hop-o'-my-Thumb had ever used a ball of string. I should be sorry to be supposed so far out in my classics, but the principle was the same of that of the pebbles. Hop-o'-my-Thumb is another story, just like this one. Go ahead and look it up, kids. It's a fun one. The end of this string he fastened to his pickaxe, which figured no bad anchor, and then, with the ball in his hand, unrolling as he went, set out in the dark through the natural gangs of the goblins' territory. The first night or two, he came upon nothing worth remembering, saw only a little of the home life of the cobs in the various caves they called houses, failed in coming upon anything to cast light upon the foregoing design, which kept the inundation for the present in the background, which remember that means the flooding. But at length, I think on the third or fourth night, he found, partly guided by the noise of their implements, a company of evidently the best sappers and miners amongst them, hard at work. What were they about? It could not well be the inundation, or the flooding, seeing that had in the meantime been postponed to something else. Then what was it? He lurked and watched, every now and then, in the greatest risk of being detected, but without success. He had again and again to retreat in haste, a proceeding rendered the more difficult that he had to gather up his string as he returned upon its course. It was not that he was afraid of the goblins, but that he was afraid of their finding out that they were watched, which might have prevented the discovery at which he aimed. Sometimes his haste had to be such that, when he reached home toward morning, his string, for lack of time to wind it up as he dodged the cobs, would be in what seemed the most hopeless entanglement. But after a good sleep, though a short one, he always found his mother had got it right again. There it was, wound in a most respectable ball, ready for use the moment he should want it.
"I can't think how you do it, Mother,"
he would say.
"Oh, I follow the thread,"
she would answer.
"just as you do in the mine."
She never had more to say about it, but the less clever she was with her words, the more clever she was with her hands, and the less his mother said, the more Curdie believed she had to say. But still, he had made no discovery as to what the goblin miners were about. And there's chapter 12. So, Rolfe, what did you think of that short chapter about Curdie?
I think it would have sounded better if I said it.
I'm sorry, Rolfe. I told you it was just too beautiful.
Fine.
I knew you would understand, buddy. So, can you tell us what happened in that chapter, Rolfe?
Yes, sir. Curdie would go into the mines with like a ball of string and use it like breadcrumbs so he wouldn't lose his way. And we learned that he was such a good son because he's working to get money to buy his mama a red petticoat.
Yes, Rolfe. Do you think you could learn a little something from him?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm kind of like your mother, aren't I?
Yeah?
Just follow the logic, buddy.
I don't get it.
All right, whatever. That's fine. Moving on. Chapter 13, titled The Cob's Creatures. Ooh, do the goblins have their own creatures? Let's find out. About this time, the gentlemen whom the king had left behind him to watch over the princess had each occasion to doubt the testimony of his own eyes, for more than strange were the objects to which they would bear witness. They were of one sort creatures, but so grotesque and misshapen as to be more like a child's drawings upon his slate than anything natural. They saw them only at night, while on guard about the house. The testimony of the man who first reported having seen one of them was that, as he was walking slowly round the house, while yet in the shadow, he caught sight of a creature standing on its hind legs in the moonlight, with its 4 feet upon a window ledge, staring in at the window. Its body might have been that of a dog or wolf, he thought, but he declared on his honor that its head was twice the size it ought to have been for the size of its body, and as round as a ball, while the face, which it turned upon him as it fled, was more like one carved by a boy upon the turnip inside which he is going to put a candle than anything else he could think of. It rushed into the garden. He sent an arrow after it, and thought he must have struck it, for it gave an unearthly howl, and he could not find his arrow any more than the beast, although he searched all about the place where it vanished. They laughed at him until he was driven to hold his tongue, and said he must have taken too long a pull at the ale jug. But before 2 nights were over, he had one to side with him, for he too had seen something strange, only quite different from that reported by the other. The description the second man gave of the creature he had seen was yet more grotesque and unlikely. They were both laughed at by the rest, but night after night another came over to their side, until at last there was only one left to laugh at all his companions. 2 nights more passed, and he saw nothing. But on the 3rd, he came rushing from the garden to the other 2 before the house, in such an agitation that they declared, for it was their turn now, that the band of his helmet was cracking under his chin with the rising of his hair inside it. Nuts. Running with him into that part of the garden, which I have already described, they saw a score of creatures, to not one of which they could give a name, and not one of which was like another, hideous and ludicrous at once. It just means ugly and crazy at once, gamboling on the lawn in the moonlight. Gambling just means jumping around, crazy and fun-like. The supernatural, or rather subnatural, ugliness of their faces, the length of legs and necks in some, and the apparent absence of both or either in others, made the spectators, although in one consent as to what they saw, yet doubtful, as I have said, of the evidence of their own eyes, and ears as well, for the noises they made, although not loud, were as uncouth and varied as their forms, and could be described neither as grunts, nor squeaks, nor roars, nor howls, nor barks, nor yells, nor screams, nor croaks, nor hisses, nor mews, nor shrieks, but only as something like all of them mingled in one horrible dissonance. Keeping in the shade, the watchers had a few moments to recover themselves before the hideous assembly suspected their presence. But, all at once, as if by common consent, they scampered off in the direction of a great rock and vanished before the men had come to sufficiently to think of following them. My readers, or my listeners, gotcha George Macdonald, will suspect what these were, but I will now give them full information concerning them. They were, of course, household animals belonging to the goblins, whose ancestors had taken their ancestors many centuries before from the upper regions of light into the lower regions of darkness. The original stocks of these horrible creatures were very much the same as the animals now seen about farms and homes in the country, with the exception of a few of them, which had been wild creatures, such as foxes and, indeed, wolves and small bears, which the goblins, from their proclivity toward the animal creation, had caught when cubs and tamed. Proclivity just means that's what they prefer. But in the course of time, all had undergone even greater changes than had passed upon their owners. They had altered, that is, their descendants had altered into, such creatures as I have not attempted to describe except in the vaguest manner, the various parts of their bodies assuming, in an apparently arbitrary and self-willed manner, the most abnormal developments. Indeed, so little did any distinct type predominate in some of the bewildering results that you could only have guessed at any known animal as the original, and even then, what likeness remained would be more one of general expression than of definable confirmation. All that crazy sentence means is you would not even be able to tell what animal they may have morphed from. But what increased the gruesomeness tenfold was that, from constant domestic or indeed rather family association with the goblins, their countenances had grown in grotesque resemblance to the human. Ew. No one understands animals who does not see that every one of them, even amongst the fishes, it may be with a dimness and vagueness infinitely remote, yet shadows the human. In the case of these, the human resemblance had greatly increased. While their owners had sunk toward them, they had risen toward their owners. But the conditions of subterranean life being equally unnatural for both, while the goblins were worse, the creatures had not improved by the approximation, and its result would have appeared far more ludicrous than consoling to the warmest lover of animal nature. I shall now explain how it was that just then these animals began to show themselves about the king's country house. The goblins, as Curdy had discovered, were mining on, at work both day and night, in divisions, urging the scheme after which he lay in wait. In the course of their tunneling, they had broken into the channel of a small stream. But the break being in the top of it, no water had escaped to interfere with their work. Some of the creatures, hovering as they often did about their masters, had found the hole and had, with the curiosity which had grown to a passion from the restraints of their unnatural circumstances, proceeded to explore the channel. The stream was the same which ran out by the seat on which Irene and her king papa had sat, as I have told you. And the goblin creatures found it jolly fun to get out for a romp on a smooth lawn such as they had never seen in all their poor, miserable lives. But although they had partaken enough of the nature of their owners to delight in annoying and alarming any of the people whom they met on the mountain, they were of course incapable of designs of their own, or of intentionally furthering those of their masters, meaning they're pretty dumb. For several nights after the men-at-arms were at length of one mind as to the facts of the visit of some horrible creatures, whether bodily or spectral they could not yet say, they watched with special attention that part of the garden where they had last seen them. Perhaps indeed they gave in consequence too little attention to the house, but the creatures were too cunning to be easily caught, nor were the watchers quick-eyed enough to descry the head, or the keen eyes in it, which, from the opening whence the stream issued, would watch them in turn, ready the moment they left the lawn to report the place clear. And that was chapter 13. What'd you think, Rolfe?
So, the goblins are scary and weird looking, but they also have pets?
That sure seems like it.
And all the pets are different because they all just mutated?
I guess you could say they mutated in a way, but it was more like a gradual alteration as the years and years went by as they lived underground.
Yeah, they mutated. That's scary.
But it's not a dragon.
Well, one of them could be a dragon. It could be a little tiny dragon. That's what all the men-at-arms were waiting for, was for something scary.
Yes, all the pets and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, we will leave it there, my friends. Now, we all know a little bit more about the goblins and their pets. We also know that Curdy has been diligently following them and watching and observing them to make sure they will not be flooding the mine anytime soon. Now, when we come back in just a few days, the next chapter, chapter 14, is called That Night Week. And if you remember from not this time, but last time, when we met the old lady again, she told Irene to meet her this night week, meaning this night next week. And the next chapter is That Night Week. I think they will be meeting again.
Oh, I can't wait!
Neither can I, buddy. Say goodnight.
Good night, my little friends.
Good night, everybody.